Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Evenings with Steve. I'm delighted to be here, and I wanted you to know that tonight is a special night for a number of reasons, but it's also the last Zoom program we're doing of Evenings with Steve, which started out, I should tell you, as Afternoons with Steve. So I thought I'd just tell you briefly how this program came to be. 2 years ago, in a couple of months, just when we had the COVID breakout, I was contacted by the rabbi at Beth Shalom, Rabbi Aaron, who was very concerned about the lack of programming, access to programming for the synagogue members. It started as a program strictly for Beth Shalom, and then of course branched out and is much broader now. But at the beginning, it was just a matter of dealing with our members' needs. And he asked me if I could create a program just to deal with it. I gladly did. And here we are, essentially 2 years and 2 months later, getting close to my 30th program. Delighted and honored to be part of this. Delighted to be with all of you. And of course, tonight is our last Zoom program. I think we're all tired of Zoom. And the plan is in the fall that we're going to start an in-person program at Beth Shalom with live streaming, so there'll be broad access to everyone who obviously can't attend the event. And we're working on some wonderful programs. I want to take a moment at this time to thank the program director of Beth Shalom Synagogue, Jen Furman, who's been absolutely essential to the success of this program. The music you heard tonight, Avidan Rachel, Jan programmed all of it. I just wanted to let you know, and this was just an idea of mine, just for people who want to relax and have some downtime. And now you can do it with a glass of wine, of course, that there'll be different Idan Rachel music, about 15 minutes that we've put together with Jan's able assistance. So when the program ends around 8 o'clock or so, please stay on if you want to hear some more wonderful melodic Idan Rachel music, who's now the leading singer in the state of Israel. So that's the introduction. So I thought, now how should I end Evenings with Steve, at least the Zoom part? Well, I wanted to do something celebratory, not something too serious. And we know how serious the world is right now in so many aspects. Just thinking back to Dennis Ross's program about, Russia and Ukraine, problems throughout the world, still the peril of COVID. But I wanted tonight to be celebratory, and I wanted it also to merge particularly loves of mine. And there are two loves of mine that we're dealing with tonight. One is the state of Israel, Medinat Israel, and the other is wine. And I love them both. So I've merged them together into a very unique program. I don't think this program's been done anywhere before. And we're going to look at Israeli wine, specifically Israeli wine, although we're going to deal with some general questions. And who better to deal with this than my guest tonight? I met her at an event. Her name is Rebecca Meir. I want to welcome you, Rebecca, to the program. I can't see you. Are you there, Rebecca? Well, I can't welcome someone who's not there yet, but I'll just tell you a bit about Rebecca as we're waiting for her to come on. She wasn't born in Israel, but she grew up in Yerushalayim. She grew up in Jerusalem, and she moved here about 12 years ago to Canada. She's a sommelier, and I'm going to ask her, actually, one of my first questions, what is actually a sommelier? We've seen them in restaurants, but do we really know what their function is, other than saying, this would be a good wine with that meal that you're having. I recommend this wine. And of course, their skill is much more expansive than just that. And why she went into it, just very curious. What was her particular interest that led her into a wine? And then we're going to, there, Rebecca.
It's gonna work.
Shalom, Rebecca. Are you there? Your mute button. I can't hear you. Well, Rebecca, can you hear me? You have to unmute yourself, please.
Steve, we're just trying to help Rebecca to unmute herself.
Okay, thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
I can.
Okay.
Excellent. Okay.
Mitsuyan, right? Mitsuyan. Don't worry. If you've seen the glitches that we've had in this program, that was shum davar. That was nothing. Okay, so I've already welcomed them, told them something about you. Welcome to the program. This is Rebecca Meir. Welcome to Evenings with Steve. So I've told them about your background and that you grew up in Jerusalem. Why did you turn to wine? Why did you become a sommelier?
That's actually a very interesting question. I didn't plan on becoming a sommelier. When I moved to Canada, I wasn't a sommelier yet. Even in Israel, I wasn't a sommelier. I worked actually in the film industry. When I arrived to Canada, there was a recession here and I had to find a solution. My solution was to go and work in restaurants. And while working in restaurants, I decided with the years to go and work in some of the best restaurants in the city. And when you work in some of the best restaurants in the city, you become very familiar with lots of wines and with sommeliers as well. So with time, I became a very good friend of the sommelier and kind of their little shadow. So I would walk around them and they would start training me. And I started to go to lots of wine tastings, wine seminars, and become very familiar with wine, start doing wine courses. And it became very obvious to me with time that that's what I want to do as a profession. How did it happen? It just happened. But now that I look at it backwards, it does make sense to me because when I was a kid, my dad is originally from Belgium. And in Belgium and Europe in general, wine is very much of a thing. And as a teenager, I used to go to wineries in Israel with my dad and taste wines. So that is something that even as a kid, I was very familiar with. And just when I came to Canada, it became an opportunity for me.
So Rebecca, let me ask you about the job, the function of a sommelier, because, I was mentioning to our audience that for me, a sommelier who's someone who's very gracious, comes to the table and explains particular wine that might be a good pairing with the meal that we're eating at the table. And that's essentially it. But a sommelier's job and task is obviously much more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, so a sommelier is the first sommelier in the world. Let's talk about the first sommelier and how it started. The sommelier was the person who was responsible for the cart of the king a long time ago that had also food and wine. So when we had kings, the somm was the first person who tasted the wine before the king tasted it to make sure that the wine is not bad or that the wine is poisoned. Don't forget that nowadays we have lots of wines that are great because of the technology that we have today. But at those times, a few thousand years ago, at those times, there were lots of bad wines. So the sommelier's job was to collect the wine for the king, go through all the villages with the king when the king promoted himself, and taste the wine before the king actually tasted it. So they actually sometimes died because of poison. So we are actually there to protect you from bad wines. Not literally today, because you're not going to die from it, but part of our job is also to check if the wine is good or if the wine is not, if the wine is corked or if the wine is not. Nowadays, moving forward a few thousand years, nowadays the job of the somm in a restaurant is to maintain the wine list. So decide which wines will be on the list of the restaurant and which wines will not. So we actually get to taste lots of wines and to choose the wines that we find fit to our clients, to our customers. So that's a major job of the sommelier in a restaurant, and then to recommend wines to specific clients. So you have to be very much in tune with what people like, what different people like, and to give them something that will either excite them, will be great for them, or a great pairing to a meal.
Okay, so I just want to mention before I continue with my questions that Rebecca is available for events, or if you wanted to come to your home. She's fluent in English and Hebrew, and her contact information is on the side and available to everyone. She's worked so hard, so industriously to prepare for this program. I just want everyone to be aware of that. So she didn't ask me to do that. I just insisted that be done. So let me ask you this, because I'm coming to it as someone who loves wine, but isn't very sophisticated about that. And I would expect that's probably representative of most of the people watching this program. we know we love it, but we're not quite sure that we know too much about it. And so the conventional wisdom that I've heard, and I'm sure others have, is, oh no, it's white wine with fish and red wine with meat. So first of all, is that right? And can you just tell us your view as a sommelier when you would order red wine and white wine before you get into the particular brand or label of the wine?
So the thing about grapes is that different people like different things. If you don't like certain type of wines and you will have them as a pairing, I mean, what's the point? So if you really don't like acidic white wine and it's great with a pairing, you might still not enjoy the experience. If you're open to different type of grapes, different types of flavors, then generally speaking, having white fish with white wine would be a great complement, in the same way that white wine would be great with lemon sauce, for example, because of the acidity of it. That said, you can have white wine with rosé. You can have fish with rosé. Having fish with red wine, again, there are people that do like it, and I'm not here to judge, and it's totally fine, and everyone can drink whatever that they want. For most people, it's not a great pairing because it brings out the metallic notes of a red wine. Now, when we talk about fish, there is a big spectrum of types of fish as well. So you also have salmon, you have trout, which are different styles of fish. And then you can go for a red wine, but a red wine that is lighter in style, like Pinot Noir and Gamay Noir. So the less tannin, the less harsh kind of taste that you have in the mouth, the more delicate the wine is, the better the pairing usually is going to be to pink fish. When it comes to meat, depends what you're doing with it. If you're making steak tartare, for example, which is, raw preparation of beef, then yes, you can go for white wine. If you're braising it for a long, long time, then maybe going for a full-bodied red would be a good idea. Okay. So it really depends on the preparation, and that's where the complexity goes, and that's where you want the connection between the chef and between the sommelier on what exactly the dish is, what exactly the wine is, to make sure you have a good pairing.
Right. So you mentioned rosé. So let's talk about that, because that's one of the wines we have tonight to taste. So when would you order a rosé? When would you order champagne or prosecco? Let's add that to our consideration.
You can order rosé anytime that you want, champagne, prosecco anytime that you want. Many people enjoy it in the summertime because it's very refreshing. Both of those options are very refreshing, but it's definitely up to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about, so it's a matter of flavor and taste as opposed to just certain rosés going with certain foods. Is that fair?
Yeah, but also don't forget that flavor is an acquired taste. Like when you were a kid and you tried your first coffee when you were 9 years old, did you like it?
No.
Your first beer,
no.
Beer, you didn't like it.
But I didn't taste it when I was 9. I want the record to reflect. I don't want to be admitting illegal conduct here. No.
Yeah, of course. But the bottom line is, when we are kids, we are not accustomed to those flavors, right. And then you have 10 beers or 10 coffee, and suddenly you're like, oh, I'm starting to like it. So it's the same with wine. There are lots of wines, like for example, red Burgundy that I tried for the first time, and it was so weird to me. I didn't like the flavor because I wasn't familiar with it. We like things that we are familiar with. So if it's the first time we taste something, many times we're not going to like it. That's why you want to be open-minded and taste things again and again, because maybe one day we'll learn to like that flavor.
Okay. I just want to remind our audience that this is interactive. And if you have any questions for Rebecca about Israeli wine when we come to it, or wine in general, this is your opportunity. So let me ask you the next question about chilling wine, because of course the notion is that, well, it's white wine, it has to go in the refrigerator. Red wine, no, it stays out. You don't refrigerate it. Is that true?
So it depends on the red wine. It depends on the white wine. Generally speaking, white wine you want to put in the fridge. That said, the sweeter the wine is, the colder you want it to be. And now we're talking only about white wines. So if you have Riesling, for example, that has nice sweetness, you want it to be very cold. If you have sparkling wine that is a little bit sweet, you want to have it very cold, okay? And then a little bit less would be very acidic wine, like Sauvignon Blanc. And then when we're going to Chardonnay, for example, and especially Chardonnay that has some oakiness, some body to it, you don't want it to be too cold. So put it in the fridge, but take it out about 5 to 7 minutes before and let it warm up a bit, because it's not that great when it's that cold. Now, mind you, temperature really, really matters. Steve, have you tried ice cream when
Yes.
it was not frozen?
Not
When
good.
it was melting?
Not good.
Why?
It just, first of all, it just doesn't have the flavor that it has. And also, I just don't enjoy the experience.
So when you are having it, when it's melted, and you tasted it not frozen cold, it tasted sweeter. So because it's frozen, it tastes less sweet.
Okay.
So the temperature that you're tasting the wine will really affect on how that you're tasting it. Therefore, it really, really does matter. When it comes to red wine, if you have a very full body, a strong, big and bold red wine, then you want it in room temperature. If the wine is very delicate, like a Pinot Noir, for example, you want it to be in a wine cellar temperature. So think about a cave temperature, about 12 to 14 degrees. So not extremely warm, just to get the right balance of the wine. So it
Would
really
you-
depends on that.
Would
Yeah.
you ever put ice cubes in white wine? Obviously in the glass?
So what happens when you put ice cubes?
It's tastes frozen, yes.
It melts.
Mhm.
So the ice cube with time will melt into the wine, and you're basically adding water.
Oh, I see.
So you end up tasting it not in the way that the winemaker wants you to taste it. When it comes to whiskey, adding 2 drops of water is a good idea because it opens it up. But when it comes to wine, it doesn't really do that. So again, you want to do it. I'm not going to judge. But if you want to actually get the flavor that the winemaker wants to give you, then you want to not put ice cubes, but just put the wine in the fridge ahead of time and have it cold as is.
So now we're going to move to Israeli wine, which is the main topic of the program tonight. But that was all very valuable information as a primer about wine generally. And we met, we spent about an hour together at Aroma Cafe, where I had an opportunity to ask you some questions. And the very interesting that I learned from you is that there's a prejudice in North America and specifically Canada against Israeli wine, despite its reputation, stellar reputation, emerging reputation as a wine that can compete worldwide with any country now. So can you just talk about what that prejudice is and why it exists?
I don't think it's against Israeli wine as much as there is lots of confusion between kosher wines, which is only for people who keep kosher, and Israeli wines. Israeli wines are not very much brought here to the public unless it is for Jewish communities that are looking for kosher wine. And that's a problem. You don't see them that much on wine lists in restaurants. And it's definitely because of the distance as well. It's also because Israeli wines are pricier because they come from very boutique wineries. Israel is a small country, so most of the wineries there are small wineries. So you don't have those big mass-produced wineries that you have, like, for example, in Chianti or in Napa. So as a start point, the wines are pricier. Add to that all the shipping, where there isn't too much product that comes from Israel as it is. So the shipping is very expensive, and everyone needs to make a cut as well, the salespeople. So it ends up being very expensive, with the fact that there aren't too many people that are talking about Israeli wine.
And just everyone who participated in the program tonight received the list of wines we're going to use. But at the bottom, it says that wines can be purchased at Simcha Wine, and there's an address on Bathurst Street. So I want everyone to know that Israeli wine is accessible in the city of Toronto, and I'm sure it is in other cities as well. And you just have to make the effort. And perhaps it's a matter, if you go to your favorite restaurant, you might mention to them if you have a particular wine that you enjoy from Israel, suggesting they add it to the wine list. And maybe that will trickle down, if enough of us do that, to overcome the prejudice that you've just mentioned. So let's talk about now Israel and where the various wineries are, the regions in Israel. Because my view before I went the first time to Israel was that it was all concentrated in the Galil in the north, but that's not the case at all, is it?
Correct. Yeah. So at the north, at the Galil and Golan, you do have lots of wineries because it's the easier place to grow vines because you have enough rain. The soil is very rich, so it's very durable to get nice grapes from it and make wine from it. That said, you do have lots of wines also in the area of Tel Aviv and near the Mediterranean Sea and around Jerusalem. The mountains of Jerusalem actually produce lots of wines as well. And most interesting part is the wines in the Negev. In the Negev, that's quite a recent thing. Right now, there are only 30 extremely small wineries in the Negev. And it's pretty surprising that they can actually even make wine in the Negev. But the reason why some winemakers figure out that they can make wine in that area is the fact that they discovered that a few thousand years ago, at biblical times, they did make wine in those areas because they found the gut, they found an old press, they found those things. So they said, if in those times they could make wine there, they could grow grape there. So nowadays, we should be able to do that as well. So obviously, it doesn't come without challenges, and production is extremely, extremely small. Unfortunately, I couldn't even find wines from the Negev here in Canada. There is one winery called Nana that is doing very well there. The challenge is, of course, there isn't enough rain, and they came up with drip irrigation, which is actually a technology that is nowadays used in Europe as well. What's happening now, we need to understand the global aspect of it. In France, there is 15% less production of wine as compared to 50 years ago. And in Spain, 24% less. And that is because of global warming. Now, we are all going to experience more and more global warming. And in the Negev, they are figuring out techniques to deal with the global warming that we are going to experience. So we will be able to make wines around the world, also in areas that do not have enough rain and where the soil is very dry and very sandy.
So in October of 2016, a magazine called Wine Spectator, which is the leading wine magazine, at least to my knowledge, in the world, dedicated an entire issue to Israeli wine. And I happened to pick it up when I saw the cover. And I'm just going to quote a sentence from the article. It's titled, Israel, this is the lead article of the magazine, Israel's Transformation. And the subtitle is, A New Generation is Reshaping the Country's Vineyards and Winemaking and Qualities on the Rise. And then quoting from the article, that there's a dawning appreciation for its wines in both Europe and America, and the wine industry in the Jewish state is transforming at a rapid rate. And indeed, one of the wines they looked at is a wine that we're going to be looking at and tasting this evening. So do you agree just that the wine in Israel can match up against the other countries like France, United States, Canada?
I mean, it already does. And like the thing is also that don't forget that there are lots of winemakers, very well-known winemakers from France that do consultation in Israel. And there are lots of winemakers in Israel that went through training in France and in Italy. So there is no reason why they won't match up. Absolutely. Okay. And I think they already do.
So we're
We
going to now
always-
move into the second part of the program exactly at 7:30 as I planned, and that is the wine tasting. I want everyone to know for the record that I took an Uber here and I'm taking an Uber home. I'm acting perfectly responsibly. I will not drink and drive. I take it very seriously. Everyone knows my background as a criminal defense lawyer. I've seen the damage, and I mean damage, lives lost, that drinking and driving causes, and I will never participate in that. So I just think I need to tell you that from the outset. So we're going to move to, and of course, Rebecca's doing the program from her home, so she doesn't have to worry. But I'm obviously at the synagogue, and I didn't want anyone to wonder about that. So you selected 5 wines. Well, actually, one is a rosé. Is a rosé a wine? Do you call that a wine, or it's something different?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, rosé is definitely a wine. It's
Okay.
made from grapes. Yeah. Mhm.
I admitted my unsophistication, but I'm starting
Oh,
to get
no.
more sophisticated as we go on. So tell us about the first one you chose, and if you could hold it up for the audience.
Yeah.
I have it here, and I'm going to be tasting it with you. So
All
go
right.
ahead and tell us. Can you just show it so everyone can see it?
Yeah, so this is the first wine that I chose for you. I chose a variety of wine. This is called Pet Nut. Now, to understand what Pet Nut is,
And just sorry, we just mentioned it's Dalton, right? So that's the
winery itself is Dalton. Dalton is located in the northern part of Italy, in the Galil. Pet Nut is actually a very unique and interesting wine. There are not too many Pet Nuts around the world. It's a sparkling wine that is slightly sparkly. Okay, so it's not as sparkly as the Prosecco that you're all familiar with, or as Champagne that you're all familiar with. And Pet Nut is made in the most archaic way, in the oldest way of making sparkling wine. Now, for that, we need to understand how sparkling wine is made. A long time ago, before Champagne even started, sparkling wine was created as a mistake. Sometimes they tried to make regular wines, and they ended up with sparkling wine. But because they did not put the wire that we know that is the top of Champagne, for example, or they didn't have the screw cap that you have on beer, the cork would jump out because of the pressure and basically jump onto another wine in the wine cellar and create a whole mess. So before the 1600s, they really did not like when they had the accident of sparkling wine. Now, how is sparkling wine made? Steve, do you think it's made like Coca-Cola?
no.
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 Why?
I'm being tested here. You
Yes.
didn't tell me you use the Socratic method.
Because it doesn't cost $1.99. It costs more.
It's not loaded with sugar. That much I know is Coke.
As well, yes, as well. So sparkling wine is created in a more natural way. The CO2 is created in a more natural way. So the CO2 is actually the byproduct of every fermentation. So when sugar and yeast converts to alcohol, then you have the CO2. So if you capture the CO2, you have the bubbles, but if you leave the tank of the winemaking open, the bubbles evaporate. Now, most sparkling wines in the world go through 2 fermentations, one to make the wine, and the second one to create the bubbles. But this time around, they make sure that the bottle is completely sealed. And in that way, the CO2 is captured in the bottle itself. But Pet Nut is different. Pet Nut goes through only 1 fermentation. So what they're doing is they take a big tank, they put the crushed grape juice, the juice inside, they make the fermentation actually happen. And before the fermentation is done, they start bottling the wine and they close it with a crown cap very quickly. And because they didn't let the fermentation finish, the fermentation is finishing in the bottle itself. And that is how you have sparkling that is bubbly, but not extremely bubbly, because it went through fermentation only halfway in a closed vessel, basically.
And we're looking at 5 wines tonight. This is one of the less expensive bottles of wine. We should
Yeah,
mention that too.
so this is a bottle for $33. So that's not very expensive. When it comes to glass, this is a great glass to have. So it's not too wide, it's not too narrow, because that's how you can smell it properly. And also it's not too wide, so the bubbles do not evaporate.
Okay. Now I'm using 5 different paper cups tonight. I just want to be
not
very
judging.
clear, not pretend to have those beautiful glasses because I couldn't transport them. So I hope everyone excuses me. So I'm going to taste it now. You go ahead, Rebecca. L'chaim.
L'chaim, l'chaim.
Oh, that's very nice.
It's very nice, right? It's very summery, very
very
easy
summery.
drinking. If you're having party at the backyard, this is the perfect wine for you.
Yeah, because you're right. You taste the sparkling wine, but it isn't quite as strong as a Prosecco or champagne. It is one
Exactly.
grade below. And that's a unique market.
Yeah. Mhm.
And is Dalton a leading winery? Is that a well-known winery in Israel?
Yeah, quite well known. It's not one of the biggest wineries. It started by a father and son at the late 90s. But yeah, it's quite a known winery. Mhm.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to the winery that was actually featured in Wine Spectator magazine, the brothers Golan and Gilad Flam.
Yeah.
And could you just show everyone this one and just tell us something about it, please?
Yeah, so this is a very interesting label, as you can see, inspired by the mosaic that you can find in Israel. The winery started by those two Gilad and Golan brothers. Their father was actually the chief winemaker of Carmel Winery, which is one of the most known and biggest and oldest wineries around Tel Aviv. When they wanted to start their winery, the father was like, oh, it's a very risky type of business, because winemaking is very risky. It's even riskier than opening a restaurant. But their mom was very much of a believer, and she was like, no, let's go for it, we can make it. And they started that winery, and they're doing very well. They're very much of a boutique winery. They became kosher 12 years ago. And this wine is actually quite interesting. So this is it's blanc, meaning the white. Usually when it says on a label blanc, it means that it's going to be a blend of certain grape varieties. Blends of grape varieties is very typical in Israel. For many years, they created blends. And here you have Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc. So when you taste it, you have a lot of the tropical fruit and the acidity of the Sauvignon Blanc, but then you have the apple notes that come from the Israeli Chardonnay. So I think it's a very Israeli wine. It's very much of a wine that when I taste it, I taste Israel. And that's the great thing about wine. When you're tasting it and you're like, oh, I feel the sense of place, that's when you know that the wine is unique, that the wine is special.
Can you just hold that up one more time, please, Rebecca? I just want everyone to see.
Yes.
On top of the Blanc, you see the name Flam. Yeah, that's it. So Flam is the name, the family name, the brothers' names, and obviously the father was at Carmel Winery. Carmel Winery, which I've been to, is in Zichron Yaakov, is the oldest winery in Israel and was started with the help of the Rothschild family. So let's taste the Flam. And what about the price point of this wine as I'm pouring the wine?
So this is a little bit pricier. This is around the $50.
Right.
But you pay for boutique wines, right? That's a problem. It's very, very small production. They make less than 9,000 cases a year. So that's a very, very small production. So when you have such a small production, the prices are going up.
Okay, so let's you go ahead and pour, and we'll have another tasting right now. Okay, ready? Let's go.
Let's go.
Another winner. I love this wine.
It's nice, huh?
Yeah, beautiful wine.
And this is going to be really beautiful with food too. I think if the first wine is something that you want to enjoy, just like
Right.
at the outdoors, this wine is just going to be gorgeous with food, gorgeous with salad, with fish. Really, really nice. Yeah.
You know, I've tasted the best Chardonnays, the best Sauvignon Blancs, and this certainly is on par with them.
Yeah. No, it's this is ahead of the game. Like Flam are very known for their quality. They also have a red wine that is called Syrah, which is excellent. It's $65, but if you want to spend on a good wine, at Simcha you can find the Syrah as well, which is a phenomenal wine.
And that, again, and we're not getting a commission. I want to be clear about that. But Stipco Winery, that's the distributor, and that's where you have to go to get wine. Certainly
exactly.
in Toronto. So did you tell us what region the Flam was from?
So the Flam is actually from the mountains around Jerusalem. So Judeans hills basically.
Okay.
Yeah, Harei Yehuda in Hebrew.
All right. So now we're moving to the rosé, right?
Yeah.
So if you could
Yeah.
just show everyone the rosé and then just tell everyone the name.
All right. So just give it a good angle.
Yes.
So this is a Castel Rosé. So as you can see by the picture, this is if you have been to Israel, if you travel to Israel to the Castel, so it's kind of a drawing of it. So Rosé de Castel, and it's basically not far away from Jerusalem. My parents actually live 10 minutes from the Castel, so it's a really beautiful area. This is one of the better rosés that you can find in Israel right now. So you asked if rosé is a wine, and that is very interesting because let's now try to figure out how rosé is made, because red wine is made from which grapes, Steve?
Red grapes.
Exactly. White wine from
White grapes. Yellow
not
grapes.
necessarily, but
Yeah.
not necessarily,
Okay.
because what we need to
I lost my
understand-
perfect score there. I just want you to know.
Most people will answer it the same as you did.
Yeah.
What we need to understand is that grapes come in different colors and different shapes. So from very red to, it's not really white, it's more like light green, okay? And there is a spectrum, okay? Like people, we come in different colors. But when you take a grape and you peel it, like people, don't
The
peel it.
content of the character.
But if you peel it, they're all exactly the same inside.
Well, Todavar.
Exactly. So inside it's exactly the same. So if you take the skin apart and you make wine, you'll make white wine. It doesn't matter if the grape is red or if the grape is white.
Very interesting.
Now, if you take a red grape and let it sit with the skin, it will absorb all the color. And that's how you will have a red wine. So how are you going to have a rosé?
Certainly not take the cover off. We know that.
So you want some color, but you don't want all the color. So how do you do that?
Partially removed.
Exactly. Yeah, so you let it sit with the skin and you take the skin away when it has the color and the flavor that you're looking for.
Got it. Very interesting.
So this rosé is made from red grapes, Malbec, Cabernet Franc, and mainly from Merlot, which you all know as a red wine. So most of the rosés that you will find out there are made in this way. Here and there, you have rosés that are made from a combination of white wine and red wine. For many years, it was illegal to make it in France. Now they made it legal for some reason. And most of your champagne, though, it's going to be a blend of red grape and white grape.
Okay, so let's taste this. Then we have a couple of questions that I'm going to turn to from our audience. I just want everyone to know, please be patient. I will come to your questions. All right, so let's try the rosé. And the l'chaim again.
L'chaim, l'chaim.
Yes, this is a stronger flavor, but I like it very much.
So when you're tasting wine, you want to make sure that you swirl it a little bit,
Okay.
and then just to release some aromatic notes, and then you smell it.
Why do you
taste
smell it? Why do you smell it?
It's the same way when you go, when you walk in a beautiful forest, you smell the forest as well.
Right.
So you enjoy everything in life with all of your senses, and wine as well. So you enjoy the visual, you enjoy the smell, and then you enjoy the taste.
Okay. I always thought it was very disingenuous when I would see people smell it. So I thank you for
It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
correcting. All
Yeah,
right.
it's part of the enjoyment. Yeah.
So what part of Israel is this rosé from?
So this rosé is as well as flam from the Judeans Hill, Harei Yehuda, which is, it's actually, to be more accurate, it's between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv in the Castel area. So not far away from Bet Shemesh.
Okay.
That
And
helps,
what's the
yeah.
price point of the rosé just before we leave this?
The rosé is also around the $50. Yeah.
So it's more expensive.
Yeah, it's a higher end rosé. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah.
I must say, I'm starting to get a little bit tipsy here, but
Yeah.
I have a responsibility to be, in control of this program, Rebecca. So we have a question from Aurelia.
Mhm.
And first of all, she says amazing selection. So I wanted
Aw.
you to know that that's all for you, not for me. And so she had a couple of questions. She wants to know if they're all mivushal, all the wines that we're looking at tonight. Are they mivushal?
No, they're not.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not Muvushal. Yeah, Muvushal really narrows it down to a very, very small selection, unfortunately. It doesn't affect the flavor of the wine as much as people think that it does, because they basically need to take the temperature up, but very, very quickly. That said, not too many wineries are doing it. Yeah,
Okay.
it's just another step which costs them also.
So really asked a very good question, not that the first one was it. She says, how long does wine last once open? Because of course, we're not all going to finish a bottle of wine when we open it. So what do you say to that, Rebecca?
Yeah, so it depends on the wine. So if we are talking about very big and bold red wines, it can last for longer than other wines. And sometimes it's even going to be better the day after, because it just opens up a bit. So I would say if it's a very big red wine, like a Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Malbec, then it definitely has like it has almost 4 days, okay? If you're talking about something like the Pet Nat, you better finish it today.
Okay.
'Cause
I'm not. I just want to be very clear about
friends, enjoy it. If you are having a Prosecco, there is like a special stopper, champagne stopper, it's called, that can hold the CO2 from evaporating. So you can have that, and then the Prosecco or the champagne can last for about 3 days, I would say.
Okay.
White wine as well, 2.5 to 3 days. It's for the 4th day is a stretch, to be honest. But when it comes to red wines, the 4th day would still be okay.
I want everyone to know I went to Crate and Barrel because I bought a decanter for this program, but I also bought wine stoppers. They're only $2.50 to get a very good wine stopper that you can use effectively if you don't finish your wine. So you don't have to start to try to put the cork back in. These wine stoppers are perfect. So do you refrigerate red wine if it's not finished, or is it still the same rule you would leave it out?
It's actually a good idea to put it in the fridge. It preserves it, like with your food. It preserves it for longer. It holds it for longer. So even if it's red wine, put it in the fridge. Just make sure to take it out enough time before you want to drink it, so you won't drink a cold red wine, because that is not tasty.
Okay, so we're now down to 2 wines, and we're right on time. Now the next wine is a Tepperberg, you want me to pour some of it into
so we can just quickly talk about this little thing that maybe some of you have it. I know that some people get it as a gift from people. It's called a decanter. Many people who have it at home actually don't use it because they don't know when to use it and why to use it. But this is a useful tool especially when a wine is very harsh for your palate. We call it, when you feel very harsh tannins. When you want the wine to be a little bit softer, smoother, a little bit more delicate, if you decant, if you remove the juice from a red wine into it and let it breathe for a while, for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, it will soften the wine itself. It's also something that is very good for older wines, okay? Because it opens them up after so many years that the wine was captured in a bottle itself. So it's a very good tool to have. We are going to decant into it the Inspire, which is the next wine.
Okay,
It's
we'll
not
talk
going
about
to
the
do
wine in a
much
moment.
to it.
Let me just decant. Is it called,
Yeah.
is that the verb decanting?
Yeah, decant it. And when you decant, you want to decant it like this, in an angle.
Okay.
Okay, so you want to decant it in an angle. If you have an older wine that has like sediment at the end, then you can see when the sediment comes, and that's why you want to decant it in an angle, basically.
All right, so let's talk about the wine now before we come back to the decanter. And I can also tell you, you can get decanters at Crate and Barrel, Williams and Sonoma, which are a little pricier, or you can order them on Amazon. Okay, so they're very accessible, and I think they're, you know, really nice design that goes on your shelf, and they come in all shapes and colors, so they're lovely. So let's talk about the wine, the Tepperberg. If you could hold that up and just tell us about this wine.
So this is a Tepperberg Inspire.
So just before you continue, on top of the Tepperberg, that's the Hebrew letter Tet.
T, Tet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Tet.
exactly.
That's what I was very curious about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the Tet of Tepperberg, basically. That's the logo. So Tepperberg is quite a large winery. Some say that the third largest, some say that the fourth largest winery in Israel, and also one of the older wineries. Now, when we are saying older, we're not talking about biblical times. We're talking older, like almost 200 years. So right now, the fifth generation runs the winery. All of the wines that we are tasting today are actually family owned. Okay, it's a very natural thing in Israel. So this is made from the fifth generation, and the winery is very well known to make wines that are great at any price points. So this wine is actually very good for the price. It's $32. I know it doesn't sound, you know, it still sounds pricier but for a good Israeli wine, it is a very good price. But taste it, Steve. Let me know.
Okay, and I don't think we mentioned the price of the rosé. That's the most expensive wine.
Yeah, the rosé is 56. Yeah.
Okay,
56,
so I'm going to pour from the
great.
decanter into the glass. Okay.
Yeah. Now,
And
Tepperberg.
this is where I'm going to get drunk because I poured a lot into the decanter. Do you notice I'm getting a little giddier as the program continues? Okay.
This is how it is with wine. You know?
Yes, I know, but that's what
it's part of the job. It's
it
part
was
of
a
the
very
fun.
selfish idea, this program, you know, to be tasting wines. Okay, l'chaim, salute,
L'chaim,
as they
salute.
say in Italy. Okay. Well, that's so smooth. Oh,
Beautiful, eh?
beautiful. Oh my gosh. One matches the other, matches the other.
This is a really nice, very lovable wine. I don't think there are too many people that wouldn't like this wine, you know?
It's beautiful.
It kind of has everything that you're looking for. It's going to be beautiful with short ribs, with steak. So this is a blend. Blends are very, as I said before, they're very common in Israel.
Can I just stop you there? Can you show the bottle because the blends are actually noted on the label?
Exactly. So you see all the grape varieties: Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and Cabernet Franc. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So these grapes are originally Bordeaux grapes. So when you buy Bordeaux, Bordeaux is always going to be a blend. And when Rothschild came to Israel, he brought those grapes of Bordeaux to Israel, the Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and they actually really suit the climate in Israel and the terroir in Israel. Terroir means the sense of place, everything that you have there. Yeah, so basically it's the Bordeaux from Israel, basically. I would call this wine.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I highly recommend all these wines. So
Yeah.
let's see, do we have any questions? No. So we'll move on to our last wine, and we're right on time.
Mhm.
I'll put the decanter aside. And how would you clean the decanter? Just put it in the dishwasher, or would you treat it more delicately?
So don't put it in the dishwasher. Just right after you finish, go to the sink and rinse it very well. Okay, make sure to rinse it very well to get everything out of it. And then you want to hang it upside down. It's better if you don't have actually, unless it got dirty and then you want to clean it with some white vinegar. But if not, you just want to rinse it because you're not drinking directly from it. So you rinse it with extremely hot water and then you put it upside down so it will dry. That's it.
Okay, thank you. So we're moving to our Acharon Chaviv, the last and the dearest. And if
Yeah.
you could hold that up and tell everyone what this wine is, please.
Okay.
Just move it. Yeah, that's better. Thank you, Rebecca.
Okay, so this is the winemaker edition. Winemaker edition means that is the winemaker's specialty. So it's more of a marketing way to say like that's the baby of the winemaker basically. And it comes from
Adir. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You're going to tell Adir Winery. Right?
Adir Winery, exactly. So it comes from Adir Winery. Now we are going back. If we started at the north with the pet nut, now we are going back to the north. So this comes from the Upper Galil, also family owned, and it's a very unique grape that you can find in Israel that is called Petite Syrah. So Petite Syrah is a grape that originally comes from France, but is never used in France as a single variety. It always comes in a blend. And it comes in a blend because when you will pour this wine, you will see it has a very inky color. So it usually brings two other wines, to Cabernet Sauvignon, it brings a strong color. Okay, so it adds colors to other type of grapes. So that's the uniqueness of this specific wine. What's important to understand that if you had Shiraz or Syrah before, it's a very different grape than the Petite Syrah. They are family members, but they are not the same. And the flavor is going to be very different. Syrah or Shiraz is exactly the same grape, but Petite Syrah is a family member who is very different in flavor and in color. It's very much stronger in color and also stronger in flavor.
Okay, so let's pour this. Perhaps you could just show everyone the color after you pour it, please, Rebecca.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Because you're right, it does look like ink.
Yeah.
What's the price point of this one?
This one is $50.
Okay. Yes. So you can see it's a very deep red, almost like a purple.
It will really like, it's one of those wine that will stain your teeth, stain the glass.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, L'chaim.
L'chaim, yeah. So it's quite interesting because this wine, usually they say decant this wine because it's the grape is very, decant this grape because the grape is very harsh. But then I open this wine and it's not very harsh.
No, it isn't. It's
really
delicious
depends.
also. It's delicious.
Very smooth. So you don't want to decant a wine like this because it's very smooth. You can find Petite Syrah in California. Sometimes they put it in a blend with Zinfandel. But in Israel, for some reason, Petite Syrah is very trending.
Okay. It's interesting that many of these wines are blends. They're not just one wine, that they tend to blend different wines. This is another example of it.
Blending is actually a great thing because think about it. If you have in a vineyard a certain percentage of Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cab Franc, and in a certain year, the Merlot wasn't that great, but the Cabernet Franc was really good, then as a winemaker, you don't need to lose your profits. You basically put a higher percentage of this grape and a lower percentage of another grape. So it very much comes to the art of the winemaker and what they do in the winery with those different type of grapes. So it gives lots of flexibility for the winery to make profit at any year. And it's a big test for the winemaker.
Okay, so just before I leave you, your overall impression as a sommelier, you've been immersed in this world for years, and you're an expert, is that Israeli wine holds its own against any wine in the world. Am I right about that?
There is lots of work when it comes to marketing on Israeli wines, I think. I think we need to bring them more into wine list of restaurants, because wine list of restaurants are very much a way to get people open to other type of regions. People are not so much familiar with Israeli wines. They haven't tasted enough Israeli wines, and that's why they don't want to gamble, you know. But the more people will taste good Israeli wines and not Israeli wines for like $7, which are usually like, you know, the price is good, but not necessarily the flavor.
We're not promoting Manischewitz.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing against it, but you know, if you want to give it to people that know wines, they will be like, "What are you giving to me?" Right? So, so I would say like the more people will taste wines that are boutique wines from great wineries, the more they're going to be open to spend money on Israeli wines, because the quality is definitely there.
All right. So I can just tell everyone, I've tasted all 5 of these wines. They're all delicious. And if we care about Medinat Yisrael, the state of Israel, and we want to promote the wineries, we're not sacrificing anything by insisting and by buying these wines. And you know, hopefully that's one of the resounding messages that emerges from this wonderful program. So thank you, Rebecca. This was fabulous. I have another question, but I don't have the time to get to it. I'm sure everyone benefited tremendously. I think they're going to go out their decanters. They're going to go out and buy the Israeli wine. They're going to start telling in restaurants that they go to start buying Israeli wine on their wine list. I certainly am going to do that. And I just wanted to thank you very much for being not just part of the program, but part of the special program, the last Zoom program of Needing to Steam. So toda rabah.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And if anyone has questions for me about how to get good Israeli wines or anything else, please reach out.
And you would do a dinner party, for example, if someone wanted to have
yeah, and check out my website, which is chefsom.ca, to see what myself and my partner Eyal Liebman do as private events in your homes and
in synagogues and programs. I hope you get a lot of work because you deserve it. So I just want to say good night. But before I do, President of Beth Shalom Synagogue, David Krieger, is asked to say a few words, and I turn it over to you, esteemed president.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. And thank you, Rebecca, for a lovely evening. I wanted to say hello to everybody, to say hello to our guests who joined, but also especially to say thank you to you, Stephen. A deep thanks for all of your efforts, the leadership that you've shown in all of these editions of Evening with Steve that you've hosted, and especially during the pandemic, you know, where people were really lonely and looking for community and looking to escape all the bad news for an hour. And it was such a pleasure to have you bring your level of enthusiasm and to the Beth Shalom community and obviously other communities that have joined in, and you've brought so many together. And we look forward, certainly in the fall, which will be here around the corner, these holidays tend to do, to have you in person with Steve again. And we're looking forward to that. And I invite all of our guests online and others to join us then. And thank you very much again. Thank you, Rebecca. It was a really great night. I learned a lot tonight, and I learned a lot at some other programs as well. And it was really, really delightful. So thank you so much for.
Thank you, David. And I just want to say, first of all, it's an honor, and I'm so grateful for your very gracious comments. But the kavod, the honor is mine, and I really believe that. And I just want you to know that one of the features we're planning for the in-person program, and I appreciate not everyone can attend in person, of course, but we're going to try to create a reception, a dessert reception. And I'm very approachable. I'm a nice person. I try to be anyways. And I'd be delighted to meet any of you. I have to tell you a funny story before I go. You know, I was at a swimming pool in Florida and in Delray Beach, and this lovely couple from Ottawa, Ontario, came up to me and said they heard my voice speaking, and they said, "Are you Evenings with Steve?" And I said, "Yes." And they are loyal to the program. They may be watching tonight, and I was just so touched that they knew me from watching this Zone program, and it was so meaningful to them. So thank you, everyone. As I'm a bit shicker, as they say, I hope I've conducted myself responsibly.
Steve, just before you close, I want everyone to know we left you there in the office a little
Yes.
thank you bottle.
Oh, thank you very much.
From the team, from the community, from Risholam, as a little token of our appreciation. It's a beautiful bottle of scotch for you once you've finished the wine. Dude, don't mix.
Yeah,
It's
that's
never recommended.
Yeah, I just want everyone to know this is volunteer. I volunteer,
absolutely
and I'm
is.
delighted to volunteer. I'm thrilled and honored to do it, and it's been a joy.
No.
I hope it's imparted some joy to your lives. And don't forget, when I say goodnight, we have the wonderfully done Rachel for the next 15 minutes or so, playing some fabulous music. So on behalf of me, Steve Skurka, Evenings with Steve, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and good night. And good night, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Good
Bye.
night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jan.
שם בהרים שמעל הכפר שלנו יש שם גן של שושנים. מחר אצא לי השכם בבוקר עם ציוץ הציפורים. אביא לאהובים לי שם פרח משדה האדומים. ידע אני שלו והוא שלי לעולמים. ירדתי מהר לכפר שלנו בשערי שושנים. אך אהובי לא בבית, שקט בין החדרים. שם בנהר שליד הכפר שלנו, אהובי בלילה לא חזר. מצא לו אהובה אחרת וליבי נשבר. מחכה ביום ובלילה, לא, אין לי כוח שעוד יום יבוא. שושנים עצובות והוא לא פה. אלוהים תעשה שיבוא. מחכה ביום ובלילה, לא, אין לי כוח שעוד יום יבוא. שושנים עצובות. ידע אני שלו והוא שלי לעולמי. שנים כולם חוזרים, עוטפים אחרי השמש, שבועים בתוך מעגלים, כולם מסובכים, אז מה את עוד חולמת? שנים הם מסתירים, שנים כולם יודעים, אבן מתהפכת, בלילות ובימים כולם כבר מדברים, למה את עוד נשארת? עדיף לרוץ לאש, לדרוש לא לבקש, ממה את מפחדת? אין מה לחשוב כשהוא אומר, הזמן יפה יותר, תביא את היום. שנים הם שואלים, שנים לא מקשיבים, שומרים הכל בבטן, זה מצטבר וזה גובר, וזה בסוף גומר, על מה את מדברת? עדיף לרוץ לאש, לדרוש לא לבקש, ממה את מפחדת? אין מה לחשוב כשהוא אומר, הזמן יפה יותר, תביא את היום. יוצא שאת תמיד שותקת, אבל בפנים זה בוער ונשרף הכל, כל המילים שנעלמו, תמצאי אותן בחלומות של אחרים. יוצא שאת תמיד שותקת, אבל בפנים זה בוער ונשרף הכל, כל המילים שנעלמו, תמצאי אותן בחלומות של אחרים. נשארים סגורים, לחזים ברוח, כל אסון עודף אחר, זה בא, זה מדבר, חוזרים לפצע בטוח. עדיף לרוץ לאש, לדרוש לא לבקש, ממה את מפחדת? אין מה לחשוב כשהוא אומר, זמן יפה יותר, תביא את היום. יוצא שאת תמיד שותקת, אבל בפנים זה בוער ונשרף הכל, כל המילים שנעלמו, תמצאי אותן בחלומות של אחרים. יוצא שאת תמיד שותקת, אבל בפנים זה בוער ונשרף הכל, כל המילים שנעלמו, תמצאי אותן בחלומות של אחרים. שנים כולם בורחים, שנים כולם חוזרים, רודפים אחרי השמש. דבר אליי מילים פשוטות כמו שהיינו פעם, כשעוד כתבת מכתבים של אהבה, כמו שהיית מחבר, נשאר איתי ולא בורח, היית בא מביא לי פרח. דבר אליי מילים פשוטות כמו שהיינו פעם, כשעוד היית מסתכל עליי, באמת לצדך, כמו שהיית דואג, אם תמיד אהיה שלך. פעם היינו מדברים לאט, היינו מדברים בשקט, מדברים לאט, היית מסתכל לי בעיניים, כשדיברתי איתך. פעם היינו מדברים לאט, היינו מדברים בשקט, מדברים לאט, היית מסתכל לי בעיניים כשדיברתי איתך. דבר אליי מילים פשוטות כמו שהיינו מסתכל עליי, נרדמת לצדך, כמו שהיית דואג, אם תמיד אהיה שלך. פעם היינו מדברים לאט, היינו מדברים בשקט, מדברים לאט, היית מסתכל לי בעיניים כשדיברתי איתך. פעם היינו מדברים לאט, היינו מדברים בשקט, מדברים לאט, היית מסתכל לי בעיניים כשדיברתי איתך. תחבק אותי חזק ואל תרפה, ימים קשים עוברים ואני נופלת מהכובד על כתפיי, אני נופלת מהכובד על כתפיי. בשקט, מדברים לאט, היית מסתכל לי בעיניים כשדיברתי איתך. היית מסתכל לי בעיניים כשדיברתי איתך. לא לפחד להתאהב, שישבר הלב, לא לפחד בדרך לאבד. לקום כל בוקר ולצאת אל החיים ולנסות הכל לפני שיגמר. לחפש מאיפה באנו ולחזור בסוף תמיד להתחלה. למצוא בכל דבר עוד יופי ולרקוד עד שנופלים מעייפות או אהבה. מכל הרגעים בזמן למצוא אחד לאחוז בו, להגיד שהגענו. תמיד לזכור לרגע לעצור ולהודות על מה שיש ומאיפה שבאנו. לחבק אותה בלילה כשהיא נרדמת אז כל העולם נרגע. לנשום אותה עמוק לדעת שתמיד אני אהיה שם בשבילה. לא לפחד להתאהב, שישבר הלב, לא לפחד בדרך לאבד. לקום כל בוקר ולצאת על החיים ולנסות הכל לפני שיגמר. לחפש מאיפה באנו ולחזור בסוף תמיד להתחלה. למצוא בכל דבר עוד יופי ולרקוד עד שנופלים מעייפות או אהבה. מכל הרגעים בזמן למצוא אחד לאחוז בו, להגיד שהגענו. תמיד לזכור לרגע לעצור ולהודות על מה שיש ומאיפה שבאנו. לחבק אותה בלילה כשהיא נרדמת אז כל העולם נרגע. לנשום אותה עמוק לדעת שתמיד אני אהיה שם בשבילה. לחפש מאיפה באנו ולחזור בסוף תמיד להתחלה. למצוא בכל דבר עוד יופי ולרקוד עד שנופלים מעייפות או אהבה. מכל הרגעים בזמן למצוא אחד לאחוז בו, להגיד שהגענו. תמיד לזכור לרגע לעצור ולהודות על מה שיש ומאיפה שבאנו. לחבק אותה בלילה כשהיא נרדמת אז כל העולם נרגע. לנשום אותה עמוק, לדעת שתמיד אני אהיה שם בשבילה. מכל הרגעים בזמן למצוא אחד לאחוז בו, להגיד שהגענו. תמיד לזכור לרגע לעצור ולהודות על מה שיש ומאיפה שבאנו. אז לחבק אותה בלילה, כשהיא נרדמת אז כל העולם נרגע. לנשום אותה עמוק, לדעת שתמיד אני אהיה שם בשבילה. כבר הייתי די רחוק ממך ולא נותרו לנו מילים לדבר, ורוח סחפה מפרס בודד, בסוף הפכה אותו בודד יותר. מכל חלום ורחש מתעורר, הכל עובר. כל מה שפעם היה ונשכח, היום הוא לא חוזר. זה רק כל קמת שבאור נחת, שהיום הוא כבר בוער יותר. מתוך שאין דרך חזרה, והכל עובר. כל עוד יום רודף לו יום ולילה, לילה. וכל עוד אין חדש על פני האדמה, טוב שרק נשארנו יחד, וטוב שיש לנו למי לספר. למרות הכל אין דרך חזרה, והכל עובר. כל פצע שהגליד ושוב נפתח, היום צורב יותר.